days, pleasant nights, and welcome to Kingslingers, a Doof Media podcast journeying through Stephen King's Dark Tower series. My name is constant reader Scott Daly, and this is the face I see in the weeds of an empty lot downtown, Matt Freeman. How's it going, Matt?
Going pretty well, Scott. I'm very mysterious, and I don't know why I'm here or what I am exactly, but still enjoying the nice crooning noise of the voices singing.
I think there's one thing we all know. Mm-hmm. You're white.
That's right. Whatever that is.
This week on the show, we continue our journey through the wastelands with Chapter 2, Key and Rose. For the first time in the series, we say goodbye to Roland for an entire episode and spend a day in the life of Jake Chambers slowly going insane in New York City. There's scary-looking choo-choo trains, keys, and a beautiful-looking rose in the middle of an empty lot. Weird. Matt, what do you think about this week's reading?
Well, like you said, it's downright weird. And what else is weird is how completely riveted I was this entire chapter. I think I blew through it in just one solid session of audiobooking, and I was completely absorbed in it the entire time. And I did want to sit back, just kind of freeform at the start of this discussion and talk about like how this book is special, because so much of it is just based in how it's making you feel from moment to moment. Mm-hmm. Even if I have no idea where the story is going, I'm still riveted to like what's going on with these characters. And maybe this is a Stephen King thing, maybe it's a this book thing specifically, but I've never minded less that I didn't know where a story was going. I think we did a book club very recently, where I complained like the reason I had a hard time getting into the book we were talking about is because I don't know where the story is going, and thus it's really hard for me to connect to these characters. I don't know where Jake Chambers' story is going at all, but I have no trouble connecting to this kid. I love this. Every bit of this was delightful, and I can't say exactly why, and I hope that we can figure it out, because one of the reasons why I like to do these podcasts is I'd like to understand why things work the way they do, and I don't understand why this works so well. So let's try to figure that out.
Yeah, I agree, and I think what you're discovering now is why I like Stephen King so much. I've tried to put it to words before. It's very difficult to put to words, which is a bad sign when you have a podcast. But this is why I like him, because I agree with you. Like the way he constructs the world it just draws you in. It just feels so rich and so fascinating. And like he can go talk about the Piper School for 10 pages that don't really matter. Mm-hmm. And you're just riveted the whole time because like you're being introduced to this world. And this is not like, this isn't Roland's world. This isn't a world of magic. This is just a kid going to school. Mm-hmm. And yet there's something inherently fascinating about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm excited. Let's do it.
It's so great. And I think let's keep that in mind as we go through it for sure, because I totally agree. Like the plot, I guess, did not really do a lot of advancing in this chapter.
Right.
I mean, definitely stuff happens for Jake, but a lot of this is just kind of Jake realizing things that we already know through the other characters. And that's kind of the fun of this chapter, is a lot of the stuff we're like, oh, I get that. Mm-hmm. I understand that reference. But Jake doesn't. And there's a lot of fun in the dramatic irony of that. There's also hints towards future stuff in there as well. But I agree that like there's not a lot of plot here, really.
Well, and also it's usually annoying to me when an author introduces a new character at the beginning of book 2. And no, Jake is not technically a new character, but he sort of is a new character. We thought he was dead. He was gone for a long time. Wait, no, this is book 3. Yeah. Basically introducing a new character at the beginning of book 3. That's functionally what this is. And I didn't feel any annoyance. I was like, oh, this is awesome, you know? So yeah, this is going to be fun.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's really great. All right. So why don't we just get into it?
Okay.
Let's start with the beginning of chapter 2, Key and Rose. Chapter 1 ended with Roland staring up at the stars, unable to sleep, and going a little bit mad, wondering where Jake was and what was happening to him. And of course, chapter 2 happily provides the answer to that question as we switch to Jake's perspective for the entirety of this chapter.
Yeah, I think I cheered when I realized whose point of view this was that we were switching to. Not that I should have been surprised, given how the last chapter ended.
Yeah. It does kind of. I kind of like this. That was one of those things where I wasn't sure if I wanted to confront you about that. As like, do you think we're going to have a Jake point of view next chapter? I just wanted you to realize that on your own. But looking back on it, you see that this chapter kind of is set up in the way in which the last one ended. And I think we'll possibly see a similar thing in that this chapter ends setting something up for the next one as well.
Yeah. And I mean, I did predict long ago that Jake was going to come back into the story, but no, I didn't predict at the end of last week that literally the next chapter would be a Jake point of view.
Yeah. So we learned that for the past 3 weeks, like Roland on the other side, Jake has slowly been going insane, hearing two voices inside his head arguing against each other.
Yeah. The way this is executed is just so perfect because it's not like Jake has two memories. It's like everything else in these books. It's complicated. It's detailed. He only gets the memories up until the same moment in the parallel universe where he fell and died in Roland's world, and then those memories loop. And it's not just memories, but rather a kind of like parallel psyche that is convinced that those memories are reality, that's hectoring him about it.
Yeah, I love a little bit later in the chapter, he'll describe it as two men sitting in a room arguing with each other. And I really like that view of it. I think it's a really interesting way to frame this insanity. And it's like Roland just sees it as like, I'm going insane. There's a paradox. Jake has no point of reference for what's happening to him at all. And so he frames it differently. His way of viewing the same thing that's happening to Roland is a little bit differently because it comes from his perspective and from who he is as a person. Yeah.
And he didn't like make the choice that led to the bifurcation the way Roland did, where something weird happened, right?
Sure.
With the jawbone. I do think it just I don't know if we are going to get a chance to revisit this idea, but the idea that his memories continue past him being killed by the car and include everything that happened in the desert and the way station and under the mountain and go right up until Roland lets him fall, and then they loop. So the first time he died, he basically just went to Roland's world. And then the second time he died, it seems like he died. And I think that's really interesting because basically the implication of all of this is that Jack Mort was the one who pushed him into the road, because stopping Jack Mort stopped him from dying. So why did Jack Mort push him into the road, lead him to go to Roland's world? Like, that's just inexplicable to me right now.
Yeah, we don't know the answer to that, and we didn't see the man in, like, originally what we thought, right, was the man in black pushed him, and then the man in black, like, as he's dying, says, I'm a priest, and rushes over him and presumably does some magic spell, right?
Yeah,
and that's how he ends up in Roland's world. But it seems like that's not the case anymore, and I agree with you. We don't really understand how that happened and why it happened, and we see Katet like extends its umbrella over Jake multiple times throughout this chapter, but we don't understand the detail of all that. No, we definitely don't.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight that because we thought we understood it, and it's easy to not revisit and be like, well, hold on, now that doesn't make sense anymore. But yeah, we'll keep our eyes open for what's going on there.
Sure. So the chapter actually starts not necessarily focusing on Jake's insanity, but actually just kind of starts to focus on King reminding us about Jake's super complex relationship with his family, specifically his father, the man that sent him to the Piper School, the best damn school in the country for a boy his age. Money wouldn't buy you into that school, for Piper, it's brains or nothing. And basically we see this demolished as bullshit and nonsense. And it's such a fascinating way of like looking at, like, we knew Jake in the other book as a character who hated his dad and really wasn't sure why yet, and like this deep-seated hatred was forming in him, but he didn't understand it yet. And here we see we're building off that relationship.
Yeah, I mean, definitely there's so much in this chapter that emphasizes that Jake is basically a status symbol. His school is a luxury good that his father is using to show off. But also, there's a lot of stuff peppered through this chapter emphasizing that Jake Chambers is actually this brilliant child. Like, he's going to this school surrounded by smart kids. He's getting a lot of special attention from the teachers. They all seem to really appreciate him. He does actually seem to be very intelligent, but I think also he doesn't really realize this. He doesn't really acknowledge that he's exceptional in any way.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. It's the kind of thing where, like, especially coming from his home, he's probably never gotten any kind of encouragement from home. So, like, no one's ever told him he's brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
Like he see like this one thing his father says, this one thing his father like repeats over and over again should be this thing where it goes, Jake, look at this, realize how smart you are. This is how smart you are. But it's not framed that way at all. It's framed as a lie. It's framed as something for other people and not for Jake himself.
Yeah.
I think it is really interesting that I think you're right. He doesn't have people treat him kindly in this regard at all, except at school. And I love that we do see that. I really want to spend some time talking about his French teacher, who writes him this really touching note at the end of this chapter.
Yeah, me too.
Like, I know we talk about this a lot, and we're going to talk about it again here. I do love just how much time King devotes to really drive home this point about how shitty Elmer Chambers is, and how much that shittiness is realized, and how he's talking about the Piper School, and like, it's fun flavor, but I do think it actually matters, because I think it helps inform Jake. It helps inform why Jake's slow insanity created by the paradox is especially concerning, because it's something that he only like goes through by himself. Like, he can't go to anyone with this, because he's got this overwhelming fear of his dad talking up the Piper School to talking up Sunnyvale Sanitarium. The only thing that gets you in a place like that is something big time goes wrong up here in the attic. That's what happened to the kid, but he's working his goddamn buttski off, making the best fucking baskets in the place, they tell me. And when they let him out, if they ever do, there's a trip in it for him. and so, like, he's just reframed his father, like, talking him up and bragging about him to others as something he's going to do when he's sent to the loony bin, basically. And I really love that, because it's just like, it's just this flavor that just to kind of pin down, like, to kind of just like talk about humans and their relationships in ways that, like, don't necessarily matter to the plot.
Yeah.
But actually kind of do in the background. Like, I think this comes around to mattering a whole lot for Jake. You know what I mean? I'm doing a terrible job of explaining this.
Well, I mean, I just think this whole passage, starting with his dad, with his imagined version of his dad, like, bragging about what a good job he's doing in the loony bin, and then switching to basically having this conversation with himself about the fact that he remembers dying. It's just a great example of what I'm coming to think of as King's wonderful and unique ability to just pin down and wallow in the intricacy and layeredness of human interiority.
Yeah.
Jake goes from, like, imagining this kind of sarcastic comedic version of his dad's reaction, if he were to go crazy, and then like an involuntary physical action where he lifts his hand to his head and mutters the way station, and then and this shows how it isn't really funny to him. It isn't really lighthearted. And then there's the back and forth argument, and it's all just, it all culminates in like a lesser writer could have just written, Jake wasn't sure what was real. It was all so confusing. Like, like, that's not, there's close third person, and then there's Stephen King third person, where like you're on the bare metal of the psyche. Like, you're tracing the thoughts through as they wind their chaotic, illogical, and contradictory way through the stream of consciousness.
Sure.
Because this is more what it's like to think, right? This isn't a description of thinking. This is moment by moment thinking. And that's what I love about the way he writes character, interiority, basically.
Yeah. And I don't know. I don't think everyone does this, but I've had arguments with myself inside my head before. And I mean, they don't happen like a back and forth like this, but there are moments where, like, you say to yourself, like where he says, don't be stupid. Look, see that poster? Remember the class 1 picnic? It says, do you think they'd have class picnics in the afterlife? And it's like where when you're arguing with what your brain is telling you, and you're trying to come up with examples. And I've done that in my head before. I think you're totally right about that. I think this is something we've talked about many times throughout the show already, just in these first 3 books. But I think you said the intricacy and layeredness is what you wrote, and I love that idea.
Yeah, and it continues to be the case. I mean, I think this is a Stephen King focused podcast. I think it's fitting to spend a lot of time talking about what makes him so compelling, really.
Yeah.
Because some people, and I don't like to waste time saying stuff like this, but like people criticize King's writing. They talk about, certain aspects of it as being, too much. And I'm like, I think this is exactly why he's so loved. Like he taps into these aspects of psychology where maybe somebody would say like, oh, that's bad. That's chaotic. That's disorganized. And I'm like, well, that's the way humans think. So,
and this is frankly why adaptations struggle so much, because so much of what makes them great is that interiority, is being in the mind of these characters. And yeah, they're great characters, and I'm not going to knock his ability to craft great characters, but I do think there's something lost when you exit that character's head, as you must in a adaptation for film or something.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah. All right, so Jake does have this wonderful, sweet, adorable interaction with his French teacher, who, unlike most of the authority figures in his life, seems to genuinely care about him. And this is this moment where I think you could see this as like, oh, look, this is like someone's extending a rope to him. And this is a person he could like talk to about his problems. But this actually just serves to further alienate him, because even the kind people to him don't understand what's happening, or could not understand what is it that's happening to him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Again, it really seems like his teachers are generally fond of him. And I think this, these scenes here also reinforce how damn lovable he is. Yeah. In case you didn't already love him after his appearance in The Gunslinger, you'll certainly love him after this chapter, because he's just so good.
He is. Yeah. He's just good. He's just good. Like he doesn't do anything bad here. He's just struggling to survive. And he's been dealt a really raw deal again and again. And, here's this one character that's extending just a little bit of kindness to him. And it's just, he's not even sure what to do with it.
Yeah.
Cause he's just so not used to it.
Right. I mean, you can always make a character more lovable and more beloved by putting them under adversity and showing them handle it very well. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what King does with Jake throughout this whole chapter.
Yeah. So the school day begins, and King introduces us to another element of Jake's problem. Beyond just the 2 people talking in his head, he has this strong, almost irresistible urge to open every door he sees, absolutely convinced that behind it is a portal to Roland's world. And we see the first one here when he looks at the cloakroom in the back of the classroom. Now, as he approached the cloakroom door, he felt that same dazzling burst of hope, a certainty that the door would not open on a shadowy closet containing only the persistent smells of winter, flannel, rubber, and wet wool, but on some other world where he could be whole again. Hot, dazzling light would fall across the classroom floor in a widening triangle, and he would see birds circling in a faded blue sky, the color of his eyes, old jeans. A desert wind would blow his hair back and the dry, nervous sweat on his brow. He would step through this door and be healed. It's a really beautiful moment, and I love King's writing there. Of course, none of these doors work, Matt. He opens the doors, and it's just a coat room, and that's it. But we are getting this hint that the solution to this problem, the Jake Roland problem, might be that Jake doesn't belong here anymore. He belongs in Roland's world, and if he finds a way to get back there, he'll be healed, quote unquote.
Yeah, that it definitely seems like the book is setting up for us somewhat indirectly this idea that if Jake and Roland can be reunited, then they'll be healed. They'll both be healed. They'll be whole. Mm-hmm. And until that happens, it's this slow downhill roll toward madness for both of them. So there's stakes and there's an element of time pressure, and this makes us anxious for Jake to succeed in finding that door.
Right.
Despite the fact that it'll really mess up his life if he abandons his whole existence on Earth to go to Roland's hell world again. Like, yeah, it's funny because we shouldn't really want this for him,
but we do.
Yeah,
like I totally
yeah.
agree, and I do think the book is somewhat setting us up to feel that kind of push and pull. It's almost as if it's some sort of catch-22. I love this moment where, having realized that the door to his classroom coat room leads nowhere, Jake just gives up. He's just like, that's it. I'm done. I'm going to go crazy. I might as well just give up and let it happen. And yet he can't. Yet there was a deep steel in Jake Chambers, as surely as there was a deep steel in Eddie and Susanna. Now it flashed out its dour blue lighthouse gleam into the darkness. There would be no giving up. Whatever was loose inside him might tear his sanity away from him in the end, but he would give it no quarter in the meantime. Be damned if he would. Love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
Right. There's something about this idea of the characters having deep steel to them that is just so compelling.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like we are defining these characters as unique and strong and special, and like we've talked throughout the drawing of the three about like why were these the ones chosen, like why has Ka and Ka Tet wrapped itself around these people, and because look, they're fucking badasses, because a lesser person would have just given up here and just fully lost it.
Yeah. And I like how that paragraph you just read manages to convey how much this sucks for him, and also how tough and therefore likable Jake is.
Yeah, totally. Jake's final exam in his English class is to write an essay about the truth, or rather his understanding of the truth. And let's just read Jake's essay, Matt. So he doesn't remember writing it. That's the thing. He sits down, he doesn't remember writing it. He opens it up and he sees he's pasted in a picture of a train and a picture of, what was the other one? I'm blanking now. The tower's on the back, but it's God, why can't I remember what the other thing is?
I can't remember what the other thing is either.
It's a door.
Okay.
It's a door and a train.
Might be. Okay.
Yeah. My Understanding of the Truth by John Chambers. And first we have to point out that this opens just like Stephen King's books all do, with quotes from poems. The first is, I will show you fear in a handful of dust by T.S. Butch Eliot. And the other is, my first thought was he lied in every word by Robert Sundance Browning. So the essay is, the gunslinger is the truth. Roland is the truth. The prisoner is the truth. The lady of shadows is the truth. The prisoner and the lady are married. That is the truth. The way station is the truth. The speaking demon is the truth. We went under the mountains, and that is the truth. There were monsters under the mountain. That is the truth. One of them had an Amoco gas pump between his legs and pretending it was his penis. That is the truth. Roland let me die. That is the truth. I still love him. That is the truth. And that's the first page. And then the second page, the first page is kind of, Matt, like a summary of what we know has happened, right? So like, this is everything in this, us, the reader, is like, I recognize that, I know all this. And then we start to move on to things we don't recognize. When is a door not a door? When it is ajar, and that is the truth. Blaine is the truth. Blaine is the truth. What has four wheels and flies? A garbage truck, and that is the truth. Blaine is the truth. You have to watch Blaine all the time. Blaine is a pain, and that is the truth. I'm pretty sure that Blaine is dangerous, and that is the truth. What is black and white and red all over? A blushing zebra, and that is the truth. Blaine is the truth. I want to go back, and that is the truth. I have to go back, and that is the truth. I'll go crazy if I don't go back, and that is the truth. I can't go home again unless I find a stone, a rose, and a door, and that is the truth. Choo-choo, and that is the truth. Choo-choo, 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 choo-choo. I'm not going to read all the choo-choos, but the point is, this is huge, Matt. And like I said, the first half establishes what we know. And so it is basically Jake telling the story of everything that happened. And the second half moves into some interesting things here. And I think we need to discuss some of these things.
So a handful of things jump out immediately, like Blaine, a name that I don't recognize at all. Yeah. Other stuff like a flying garbage truck, unclear, could be metaphorical, could be something that we see. Choo-choo, this is going to be a train. We can find out more about the train later.
Well, I mean, what we're seeing here is like, these are riddles, right? What has four wheels and flies? That's a dad joke riddle. A garbage truck. Yeah. It's four wheels and it has flies surrounding it. It's a garbage truck. It's a riddle. What is a door, not a door? That's a riddle. What is black and white and red all over? A blushing zebra, a riddle. So we know in this chapter, we're going to see two books come into the chapter. We're going to see the Charlie the Choo-Choo and Riddle-Dee-Dum, which, I mean, I feel like that's supposed to remind us of the Labstrosities. Is it just me? Maybe?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it. Anything with the dum sound to it reminds me of it. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
But there's a bunch of other stuff here. Like, I do want to point out that, like we said, the two poets are attached to the names Butch and Sundance, which Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. T.S. Eliot was not known as Butch, Matt. That is not like his nickname.
No,
and Robert Browning was not known as Sundance. So that is a specific, just King added thing. I think as if like the idea of the Western world is invading Jake's mind, and he's attaching these names to these poets.
Yeah. So I have to confess, I haven't seen Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. I don't really know the story of it. But the internet tells me that Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid were train robbers. Mm-hmm, so there's a train connection there. And also they were partners, and maybe he kind of sees himself as having been partners with Roland for that period of time. So these are all different possible connections. Yeah,
and it does not end good for Butch or Sundance. Does not. They don't have it's not a rosy ending for those two.
Okay. Well, spoilers.
Yeah, for Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, it's like a 40-year-old movie, Matt. I think it's fine.
Yeah, and westerns.
Oh God, it's way longer than 40 years old. I'm so old now. Oh my God.
Westerns always end happily, right?
Yeah. Now I'm looking up how old Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid was.
Well, also it's like a sort of a true-ish story, right? Or is it based on a true story?
Butch Cassidy was a real person.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And he died in real life. Badly.
Okay.
Anyway, so we see two poems here at the beginning, and these are specific poets. The T.S. Eliot quote, "I will show you fear in a handful of dust. You will not be surprised to hear," is from his poem The Wasteland, which we've referenced several times already in this book alone and in this series. The second is from Robert Browning's Childe Roland to the Dark Tower Came, which again, probably not too surprising to you at this point. These are two poems that King seems fascinated with as they circle around the story he's telling.
Yeah. This is going to be the weirdest flex that I ever do on this podcast, Scott, but I know a descendant of T.S. Eliot.
Wow. Okay.
His name is T.S. Eliot.
Well, I guess I feel like if I was a descendant from someone famous, I'd probably want to be named after that person.
Yeah.
Too. So I get that.
Yeah. Anyway, that's the flex over.
You flexed the shit out of that.
Yeah. But anyway, I thought about reading Eliot's poem, the Wasteland, and then I found out it was actually like 3,000 words. Mm-hmm. And the Childe Roland poem is also not short. When I hear poem, and maybe this is because I'm a pleb, but I think like half a page, like seriously, when you say poem, when you say I'm going to read you a poem, I'm like, okay, yeah, this will be 5 minutes, but no, this is a long poem. This thing it's kind of a monster. It's very challenging. Like I did not make it through the poem, because frankly, I think it's the kind of thing where you're just not going to understand it without either like a degree in literature or like a crib sheet that's cluing you into what all these little references and names mean, because it's just chock full of these references. It's the most referential thing I've ever seen, honestly. Maybe a bit like what King is trying to do with this book.
Possibly. Yeah. And I will admit, I thought about and I'm going to force myself to read both of these poems and really sit down with them. But like you, I suck at poetry, man. I just suck at it. Like I love books and I love analyzing and talking about books. And you and I have been doing this for like 5 years now. And of course I've been doing it, not on a podcast for my whole life, but poetry is just, I can't do it. I read it and I'm like, I am not getting this. And I think it's just an entirely different way of reading. And just like you learned how to read, you have to learn how to read poetry. And I've just never really had to do that. Even when they taught us poetry in school, it was mostly just like, here's this poem and I'm going to explain to you what it means. And then you can look back on the poem and understand that now, at like a crib sheet, like you said. And like when you do that for me, if someone like wrote me an essay about what The Wastelands was about, and I read that and then read The Wastelands, I could be like, oh yeah, I see that now. But yeah, just to like sit down with the poem and just knock it out and be like, I get exactly what was going on here. No, can't do it.
Me neither.
And I think part of that is probably because poetry doesn't necessarily even want to let you do that.
Yeah, No, yeah, I think the word necessarily is the key there, because there's clearly a lot of poetry like I think of Robert Frost as being accessible, where like you read a Robert Frost poem and you're like, yeah, I get what that was about. Sure. Maybe he's using symbolism and simile in ways where you kind of have to read between the lines a little bit, but as far as I can tell from my limited exposure to T.S. Eliot, he doesn't give a shit if you understand what he's talking about.
Yeah.
And that's a different kind of thing that I'm used to reading, for sure.
Sure. And I mean, the way I read, when I tackle something, I was like, I want to be able to discover what this is about. And I want to be able to discover how to understand it. Mm-hmm. And I think that is like, with a lot of poetry, like, that's kind of the wrong approach to have. Mm-hmm. And it's getting out of that approach. It's getting out of my way in that regard that I have such a hard time with. I mean, I find poetry beautiful. If someone reads poetry to me, I'll be like, oh, that sounds so lovely. But man, mm-hmm. sitting down to read it, I'm going to make myself do it. I'm going to make myself do it for the show because I think it's important enough, but it's tough.
Yeah.
It's tough.
I sympathize. And just to bring it around full circle, I do think maybe the idea of these poems that are so complicated and opaque, maybe that is a little bit of what King is trying to do with all of the references, particularly in this chapter.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I don't think you're wrong at all. And I mean, technically, if we want to get technical with it, Jake's essay is a poem.
Yeah.
And if the thing about this is, and I wonder, like, if I said, look, Stephen King has written some poetry, and I just threw this in front of you, having never read any of these books, maybe it would be just as difficult to parse and incomprehensible as Eliot's The Wasteland. Because, like, I know who the prisoner is and the Lady of Shadows and the way station and the speaking demon and Blaine, and I know what all these things mean, but I know that because they're referencing a story we've read, whereas I don't know what Eliot is referencing, if at all.
Yeah, I like that. I think all we can do is continue to pay attention to how King uses referentiality and try to see why and how he's using this idea.
Yeah, but I love this. I love this essay so much. I love the repetition of it, the use of truth over and over and over again. I love the parts we know and the parts we don't know, but having read this whole chapter, the stuff we learn about right away. And then there's of course the parts that we leave this chapter not knowing. Blaine is one of them. We hear about the stone, the rose, and the door. We are pretty sure we know what the rose is. Because we literally saw the rose. We're pretty sure we don't know what the door is, but we know doors in these books are very important. The stone is something that's still kind of a mystery.
Yeah, I don't really have any idea what the stone is. In fact, I think I like mistakenly thought of it as like being related to the key, and then I was like, well, wait, the key reference is separate from that. So yeah, I don't even know why I thought the stone was related to the key. But yeah, no, I don't know what the stone is.
Yeah, I mean, I think just like a key, a rose, and a door was what Eddie heard about. Okay. So like, I think that's just in your head. Yeah. Key, rose, door, and it's a little different here. Stone, rose, door. What is the stone? I don't know. Yep. Maybe we'll see.
Yeah.
I also want to draw your attention to the two books that Jake's English teacher is talking about during this whole thing. So while Jake is reading his essay and panicking, his teacher is talking about summer reading. And she mentions two books here. She mentions Lord of the Flies and Catch-22. Now, of course, I think these are pretty like classic English teacher books that you'd probably find a seventh grader reading or being told to read. But I wonder, talking about poetry and references, I wonder if we can suss out a little more meaning from these two stories as in relation to what's going on with Jake.
Sure. I mean, so once again, King is doing this referentiality thing where he's throwing in these names of classic stories. And once again, King is shaming me with my lack of knowledge of the Western canon because I haven't read Catch-22. I did read Lord of the Flies in school. Mm-hmm. I did want to mention that this is just interesting to me. Lord of the Flies sounds like Lord of the Rings, but that's actually just superficial as far as my research can turn up. Both books were actually published in 1954.
I did not know that. Yeah, that's cool.
There's actually a chance that Golding and Tolkien knew each other because they both were kind of in the vicinity of Oxford. But there's no real evidence that like the names of the books are related or that the books had any real relationship. It's just kind of cool trivia that I felt like people might find interesting. Yeah. Both of those books, though, Lord of the Flies and Catch-22, can be said to be about war. but not in the usual way. Like the boys in Lord of the Flies are part of a wartime evacuation, and then their plane crashes, and they find the dead body of a fighter pilot at one point in the story. There's also like a horrible unjust murder toward the end of the book. Catch-22 is about like this psychology of people during wartime, basically dealing with men who are trying to like con their way out of having to fight. There's also a horrible murder toward the end of that book, as far as I understand.
Catch-22 is so fucked up.
And again, I haven't read it, but I think I know what goes on in it. But basically, like both books have notions of characters undergoing psychological torment while aerial combat is happening somewhere nearby.
The Catch-22 and Catch-22 is that if you are declared mentally insane, you don't have to fly anymore. But if you are declaring yourself mentally insane to avoid flying, that basically means you're sane enough to fly. Because you're smart enough to recognize danger and threat, and therefore, like, that's the Catch-22. And so, I mean, I do think there's a lot here, and we could go really deep into this, and I don't want to spend too much time on it, but like I joked about, there's a Catch-22 of like the thing that will save Jake's life will also doom him. If what is saving him is going back into Roland's world, if that's the only way to heal himself, to heal his broken mind, then that is also going to doom him to the same fate that everyone else in his quartet has. That they are going to have to go on this quest with Roland that might end with their deaths. That probably will, as the book has kind of put it, by comparing it to Roland's last group of companions again and again. So that seems like a damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of situation there, a Catch-22 kind of situation. I think Lord of the Flies is interesting because I agree with you. It's about like the kind of a descent into madness for children in this case. I like the idea, like the beast, which they decided there was a beast living on this island, and half the group like became to worship the beast, and it was just voices inside people's heads. I think one character in Lord of the Flies like hears someone talking to him in his head, and it's all ends up being bullshit, but it motivates him to do stuff. I don't remember. It's been so long since I read that book.
My recollection is that they're all eating this fruit that's like fermented, and so some of them start hallucinating because of that. But I don't know.
That makes sense. Yeah. It's like I do think King picked these books for a reason, and it's not like going to be there's not going to be 1-to-1 comparison. But I think you're right. This examination of psychological deterioration is definitely here. All right. So terrified that his teacher will take one look at his essay and know that Jake has absolutely gone mad, he asks to be excused and flees the classroom and the school. And then we get another Stephen Kingism, Matt, where it says he opened the door and it was only the hallway on the other side, but he was right about one thing just the same. He never saw Mrs. Avery's classroom again. Dun, dun, dun.
Sometimes it's nice to not have to wonder. You just like, okay, thanks, King. You're telling us the plot is going to start moving in a serious way soon because
yes.
And that's exciting. I mean, I get that it's a Kingism. It's sort of like almost a cliche, but it's functional.
Yeah, it is. I mean, like cliches are functional. That's why they're cliches. Right. So one thing I really like throughout a lot of this chapter is as Jake struggles to hold on to his sanity, it is the voice of Roland in his head that is the calming presence. Like he hears Roland here. And the thing that I love about the way King writes it is we're not even clear that he knows what that who that is or what the name, like to us, the reader, it says Roland's voice speaks to him. But I don't think Jake knows who Roland is because like later when he's in the spot, like I guess he wrote it in his essay, but later when he's in the lot, he hears the name Roland of Gilead. He thought he heard, and like there's no recognition there. It's like, oh yes, he sees him as the old man with the bombardier eyes. I don't think he's quite so it's not like Jake is in his head saying I'm hearing the voice of Roland. He's just like I'm hearing a voice, and you reader, this is Roland's voice.
Yeah, I like that. The audiobook reader literally reads it in Roland's voice, which is kind of fun.
That's really cool. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think I picked up what you're talking about. This idea that Jake's memories are not necessarily letting him recognize this voice.
Yeah. He's still like it's all pieces and bits and confusion, and he doesn't know these people like he should.
It is weird that the voice would be there at all, though.
Yeah, is this like we talked about this with the Man in Black last book, and with his father, and with his old trainer, like where Roland heard these voices. Is this seems more than just Roland's or Jake's consciousness in the back of his head, like poking at him. This seems something a bit more.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, it struck me as magical in some way, but in what way exactly? I don't know.
Yeah, and it always helps him like get through the moment, but never helps him with what to do next. Like it says, like, you'll get through this, like just, chin up kind of thing. And it's like, okay, well, where do I go next? And then the voice goes silent. And so it's like, it's always immediate help, but never future help at all.
Well, like moral support rather than actual help.
Yeah. So we cut back as Jake is leaving the school. We cut back 3 weeks earlier, and he recounts basically the moments where all the trouble began, the moment where he should have died and didn't. I love the slow countdown that King employs here as we like start counting down the seconds, and we know what's coming. Jake knows what's coming as we see it play out, but it just really helps like escalate the tension and the pace of the chapter as like we're counting down. Anytime you throw a countdown into your book, it just like it really, you start reading faster, I think. And I know you can't do that because you're audio booking, but when you're actually reading the words, I think your reading speed picks up a bit.
Yeah, this is the kind of thing I'm talking about when I say how absorbed I was in the reading, where he's doing everything he can to make it exciting and interesting, even if it's something we literally have already seen before.
Yeah. And it is interesting here because even in this first moment, Jake recognizes everything before it happens. It hasn't happened yet, right? Like technically, quote unquote, the moment of Jake's death hasn't happened yet, but he starts accurately predicting everything. Like it's almost like the power of the paradoxical moment just screws with everything so much that time means nothing anymore, and everything's splitting and falling apart. And so he's able to like predict moments before they happen. Yeah,
I like that. It's so excellent here because, like you were saying, we know he doesn't die here, but we don't really know how it goes down. We don't know, like, are we going to see the Man in Black? Are we going to see Jack Mord? Is something going to happen that all we know is somehow he's not going to die this time. And like you said, King is able to build this huge amount of tension around a moment where technically we already know everything consequential about this moment.
And we've seen much of it already.
We've seen it we've seen it the first time through, but we want to see it so bad. It's amazing how much oomph he manages to put into this scene, which is sort of inconsequential, actually. I love it.
Yeah, it's like I think the countdown helps with that. Like we're counting down to nothing because we know he's not going to die here. This is a flashback. We know nothing's going to happen here, and yet it still pulls you in for sure.
Yep.
And of course, so he doesn't die here. Nothing happens. He counts down to 0. He feels the push. And actually, he's so expectant of the push that he almost kind of pushes himself. But then someone reaches out and stops him from stepping into the road. And I'm like, that's Katet. There we go. We see it again. And this is when everything really starts to begin. I like we already talked about this, but I really love the detail that not only does Jake remember dying and suffering the trauma of feeling his death, but as time moves on, he's experiencing both lives simultaneously. I really like that idea that as he's going through his days in New York City, he's like, okay, well, now this is the part where I saw the Man in Black, and this is the part where I met Roland, and this is the part where we went under the mountains, and this is the part where I died again. And he's experiencing that. Like, I don't know exactly what time it was when he says, go, there are other worlds than these, but I'm imagining like Jake just sitting in class and experiencing his second death again and how horrifying that would be. And then, as like you said, it just repeats from that point on. Yeah,
I think I may have envisioned something similar. It's fun because, like you pointed out, this is all a flashback. We are essentially the threat of the present is long after all of this has already happened, and he's been struggling with it for some time, but forcing us now to then go back and think about what this must have been like as he's sort of like watching this movie play in his head almost. And really the sense I got of it was like he doesn't know the whole story before he sees it all the way through the first time.
No.
And so that's just such a fun idea.
Yeah, but like it's been 3 weeks, and he says that it starts playing again. So like you understand the insanity, right? When it's like it's not only are you experiencing your second death, but you're experiencing your second death for the third time, the fourth time, the fifth time, and how psychologically exhausting that must be. Yeah, I love the writing here, where it says the 3 weeks between then and now stretched like a grim, blighted terrain in Jake's memory, a nightmare wasteland where there had been no peace, no rest, no respite from pain. He had watched like a helpless prisoner watching the sack of a city he had once ruled, and his mind buckled under the steady, increasing pressure of the phantom voices and memories. He had hoped the memories would stop when he reached the point in them where the man named Roland had allowed him to drop into the chasm under the mountains. But they didn't. Instead, they simply recycled and began to play themselves over again, like a tape set to repeat and repeat until it either breaks or something comes along and shuts it off. I just like the writing there. It's so delicious. The metaphor he uses, like the simile, like a helpless prisoner watching the sack of a city he once ruled. Like that's describing his mind. Yeah. Like he's sitting here, a prisoner in his own mind, watching it be destroyed. Or there's nothing he can do.
Or the idea of a tape set to repeat until it breaks or someone shuts it off. It's like, well, the metaphor there is clear that this is going to keep happening either until he breaks or somehow is able to shut it off. Yeah.
Someone else shuts it off. Yeah. It's so good. God, I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, me too. It's great.
So back in present day, Jake wanders around New York City for a while, and then he suddenly realizes that for the first time in 3 weeks, he doesn't hear the arguing voices. King describes it as like the two men arguing, and there's a parade that distracts them. And I love that. I love, Matt, I want to talk to you about this random ass interaction he has with these two expertly dressed businessmen playing tic-tac-toe on a wall in the middle of New York City at like 9 o'clock in the morning with a super expensive pen. They're like dressed to the nines, and they've got like a $1,000 Mark Ross pen or something ridiculous. And they're just sitting there hanging out on a Tuesday morning playing tic-tac-toe. It's so weird.
Yeah. And they're clearly like old friends. And everything that happens during Jake's walk here exists in this kind of charmed, magical space where everything he comes across is good and happy. Like there's two old friends just playing tic-tac-toe. Who knows what where their lives have led them, what led them to this point. That the point is that they're happy, they're hanging out. Neither of them seems to be a secret murderer. They're happy to see Jake and interact with him briefly, and then he moves on, and there's no sense that was important at all. It was just like, hey, that's cool. That's nice.
Yeah, and New York City in the late 70s and 80s, and I think this is 1977, is not like the safest place in the world. Like there's like, especially I think they're on like 46th Street, which is near Times Square, which is not the Times Square as we know it today. It's not like the safest place in the world, but yeah, it's like he's entered this the space in the world in which everything is good and nothing and I mean he puts words to that, right? Like the parade that he's talking about, the thing that has distracted the two men arguing in his head is white. This was the word that came to him, and it clanged in his mind with a clear and unquestionable rightness. It's the white, he exclaimed aloud, the coming of the white. He walked on down 54th Street, and as he reached the corner of 2nd and 54th, he once more passed under the umbrella of Quartet. So Matt, what's the white?
It's something good.
Yeah.
Jake seems to be under the protection of some force here, something magical and or psychic, which is giving him like a reprieve from his torment. And I think also to a degree guiding his movements, because maybe I'm misremembering, but I don't think we really understand why he's choosing to walk where he walks.
He's not choosing, really. Yeah. He's just walking. It just feels good.
And he ends up going to these critical locations where he sees these things that are obviously important. And I think that's, I don't know if Quartet and the white are the same or related to each other in some way. But I think they're distinct, honestly. I think the white is more like more something associated with the rose, and Ka-Tet is Ka-Tet. It's Ka. It's a separate thing, or maybe they're related.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I mean, like, I think from Jake's understanding here, the white is goodness.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's good. It's clear. It's taking away his insanity. It's good feeling. Everything about it is good and positive.
Mm-hmm.
Ka hasn't necessarily been a tool of only good, right?
True.
It seems beyond the idea of good and bad.
Mm-hmm.
So I do agree with you. As we understand it in the book right now, they seem distinct and different.
Mm-hmm.
But Ka-Tet is leading him towards the white, or the area that he describes as the white.
Mm-hmm.
So like they are like interacting with each other, but
yes,
it's just more kind of nebulous terms for things we don't quite understand.
Yes. And I do want to connect them, but I also want to distinguish them in my head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, like the white is like, you know, just classic color metaphor is like white as goodness, dark, shadowy as badness, right? And of course, we have to remember that this is a series about the Dark Tower.
Mm-hmm.
And so I make what you will of that. I don't know, but it's an interesting contrast.
Yeah.
I think we're going to see that contrast continue because one of the things that we're doing as Jake continues to walk down the street is he's basically reliving Eddie's dream.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll get into that more as we
get there. Just one last comment on the white. You know, Lord of the Rings imagery is this powerful thing, and Gandalf the White is probably the most direct reference that I can think of, where he dies, he comes back as Gandalf the White, which I literally connected Gandalf to Jake previously.
That's true.
He comes back as Gandalf the White, and he's been empowered. He's been given not just a second chance, but he's been given a higher station. And he now is a more empowered representative of the goodness of the world. And so that's I think that seems like a pretty direct reference to me.
Cool. Yeah, love it. All right. Let's move on because we got to talk about the Manhattan Restaurant of the Mind.
Okay.
So Jake, under the influence or the umbrella of Ka-Tet, as King says it, stumbles upon this bookstore, which is done up to look like a diner. And I love this. First of all, I want to talk about these couple sentences that King writes as he walks into the bookstore. Jake went in aware that he had, for the first time in 3 weeks, opened a door without hoping madly to find another world on the other side. A bell jingled overhead. The mild, spicy smell of old books hit him, and the smell was somehow like coming home. The question was, why was he here? Was it luck, or was it part of the soft, insistent feeling that he was following a trail, a kind of force beam that had been left for him to find?
Yeah, so Jake is using every possible concept to tell us that Ka is drawing him here, without actually saying those words.
Sure.
And there's another use of drawing, by the way, like a magnet draws iron filings.
Yeah, that's great.
And I wonder if like Ka and the beams are related in any direct way, because Ka and the beams both seem to have this property of pulling things in a direction.
Sure.
I don't know.
Interesting. I like that. But yeah, I mean, like this is what King is doing this whole chapter, Matt. He's just having fun.
Mm-hmm.
He's just having fun using words that Jake does not understand, but we do. Like force beam. Like we just finished a chapter where we learned what the beams were, and he drops this word for us here as he's following a trail. And so the Ka-Tet back in Roland's world is currently following the trail of the beam. That's what they are doing. Mm-hmm. And here in this world, Jake is doing the same thing, a kind of force beam. Mm-hmm. I just love it. I just love how much fun King is having here. And like that's the fun thing about dramatic irony, is that it makes you, the reader, feel like you've got a leg up on the character. Mm-hmm. And that confidence makes the actions a little bit more entertaining and fun.
Yeah, it actually removes a little bit of the fear and replaces it with a kind of certainty, which is comforting and definitely fun. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. So inside the store, 2 books immediately catch Jake's eyes. A children's book called Charlie the Choo-Choo by Beryl Evans, and an old ratty joke book called Riddle-de-Dum. We already talked about these 2 books, and we talked about Dumma-Chum and how this made me think of the Lobstrosities immediately. so we've already, like, this is the cool thing because we remember the essay and we see here Choo-Choo and we see here Riddle-de-Dum. And so we know there are riddles. We know there's a Choo-Choo. And so like, oh, it's like the essay he wrote. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Love it.
Jake is immediately mistrusting of Charlie the Choo-Choo, though, Matt. He looks at the cover of the book and says, "You look happy, but I think that's just a mask you wear. I don't think you're happy at all, and I don't think Charlie is your real name either." These were crazy thoughts to be having, undoubtedly crazy, but they did not feel crazy. They felt sane. They felt true.
Yeah, the Charlie the Choo-Choo book is just so delightfully unsettling. I love everything about the Charlie the Choo-Choo book. It's my favorite thing in the world. And we definitely know this train is no good. I mentioned before that there's a demonic train on the cover of the book. So that seems to be a hint to me.
Sure. And the thing you don't know is that in the book, there is a picture of Charlie the Choo-Choo. Like some versions of the book have illustrations in it. And there's a picture of Charlie the Choo-Choo and the children in the back of it. And we'll talk about this more when we get to the part where he just reads the entire book. But that's going to be fun.
Okay.
It's wonderful. The picture of Charlie the Choo-Choo is just wonderful. It's just so good. I want to talk about this thing that King does a lot in this chapter and overall. This line right here: "These were crazy thoughts to be having, undoubtedly crazy, but they did not feel crazy. They felt sane. They felt true." And there's this thing, I think, when you're making a book that has a lot of crazy magic shit going on, you want a way for your reader to be able to rely on the information that they're seeing, right? Like, you want a way to separate between bullshit and no, this is actually just accurate. Like the thoughts that this character is having is just accurate. And I think King doesn't pull any punches in this regard. I think he likes making very clear declarative statements that say like, hey, this is right. That what he's feeling right now is right.
It's true.
You don't need to question what he's saying here. You don't need to wonder, oh, is this narrative bias? Is this is this point of view bias? Are we being biased here? Is he got something against this Choo-Choo train and it tells some deep-seated thing about Jake? No. Yeah. It's just, he's just right here. The book is just telling you he's right.
Yeah, because it's really easy to get wrapped around the axle when you have a character who is like maybe losing their mind and then start asking yourself about every single thing that happens. Like, oh, is this a delusion? Is this a hallucination? Is this an unreliable narrator? And maybe sometimes the author does want to give you a sense that maybe they're a little bit of an unreliable narrator, but also that just means even more strictly, they need to have some way of communicating to you, the reader, like, don't waste your time wondering if this particular thing is crazy or not. And I think King does it very well because he recognizes the issue and he just kind of deals with it in a very efficient way when he needs to.
Yeah, he's just like, nope, don't worry about it. And I think the cool thing about that is when you've established yourself as someone who is going to make it clear when things characters are feeling are just accurate, then you get to play with that a little bit on the other side, which is if you want something to be if you want someone to be uncertain about whether something a character is thinking is right or not, just don't put that line in there. And we've been trained, so we're going to be like, oh, I don't know if that's true. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially the way we read these books, we are prone to read into every detail and look for deeper interpretations and look for like, yes, well, it could also be this other thing that is the opposite of the way it appears. And it's nice to avoid those sort of pointless tangents when the author just tells us like, no, it's just this is what it is. Yeah. Move on.
Yeah. I do want to see you go on some of those pointless tangents though, I think it'll be fun, but no, I get what you mean. So despite not liking this book at all, he feels like he needs it. He needs to get it. And he needs it so strongly that when the shop owner, Calvin Tower, approaches him, he doesn't even want to give him the books. He doesn't even want to hand it to them. He's like, I'm gonna just run out the store with these books because I need to have these. Once again, some force is like drawing him towards these books and he needs them.
Yeah.
Hey, speaking of Calvin Tower, let's talk about this guy, Matt.
Yeah.
His name's Tower.
Uh-huh.
That's a name.
Yeah, that seems interesting. That raises some flags.
Well, and I love that Jake reacts viscerally to his name, even though he has no idea why.
Yeah.
Right? Like, he's just like, he's shocked to hear the name, and he's like, why? And I don't know.
Uh-huh.
I love, like, Calvin is just a really interesting character here, and like, he's such the typical, like, bookstore owner in that everything he says is a reference. Like, he says Jake Chambers reminds him of the name of a hero in a Western novel. Then he calls him Hyperborean Wanderer. He later quotes a hymn by William Cowper in reference to him. He's just kind of a weird dude that just is constantly referencing poem or story or something. And Jake is unsure if he likes him or not. And we're unsure of the things that he's saying to Jake. Are they said with knowledge, foresight, or something, or is he just teasing the boy?
Yeah, like, is he just a weirdo, or is he a magical, important prophetic figure who knows secrets he should not know, or somehow is he both?
Right.
I mean, one lens could be like, he is just this kind of quirky and eccentric guy who runs a bookstore, and in this particular moment, Ka or the White or whatever is just speaking through him and giving Jake what Jake needs in this moment. I personally like the idea that Calvin Tower is just this eccentric dude who wants to run this really strange and interesting bookstore, and that's what he wants to do with his life, and he's having a great time living the dream, playing chess, running his bookstore, quoting things. That's all, and then we never see him again. That would be great.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. But one thing we know is that Jake is never going to see him again, because as he walks out of the store, we get another Kingism where he says he will never step inside the store ever again.
I had to look up Hyperborean Wanderer. Basically means like person wandering the extreme north latitudes. It was like the word that the Greeks used for the people of the extreme north. Yeah, which I assume means, Europe.
Just the extreme north of them.
Yeah. Right.
No, that's true. It's like I think they were literally a race of giants who lived beyond the north wind, I think it was. So yeah, just like this, it's almost as if he's saying, you don't belong here. You are of the north. You are of beyond here.
Yeah. You remind me of someone from a Western or from an alien realm. Yeah.
Right. So shamed by his customer, Aaron Deep now, who's just the guy who's like just playing chess with him, who also is reading a book called The Plague, which King references like 5 times. Like, everything Aaron Deep now says in this story is the man who was reading the book The Plague. Like, I think he repeats it like 4 times. He just wants you to really, really know that this guy's reading The Plague. He kind of shames Cal Tower into cutting Jake a deal on the books, and he gives him Charlie the Choo-Choo for just under $8 and throws in the Riddle book for free, which is perfect because that's just so happens to be the exact amount of money that Jake had.
Yep. Ka.
That's Ka, baby. Yeah. So he makes the sale. Jake like rushes out. That he invites him to stay for coffee, but Jake's like, no, I have places to go. And we're like, you do? But this is just like his feeling he has. He has somewhere to be. He has something he's supposed to be doing right now. And so he goes and does it. And but first he walks right outside the store and opens the Riddle book and reads the introduction and is like immediately stumped. Here's the introduction of the Riddle book. The Bible contains several good riddles. One of the most famous of those was told by Samson on the day he was married to Delilah. Out of the eater came forth meat, and out of the strong came forth sweetness. And he reads the intro, which says all the answers to the riddles are in the back of this book, flips to the back of the book, and what do you know, Matt? The answer section is ripped out of the book. So he won't know the answers to any of these riddles. But he walks back in the store and tries to get help with the answer. And Aaron Deep now explains the answer via singing, which is, of course, a lion and honey. It's basically a riddle that makes no sense because it is based on a private experience that Samson had. He was hunting a lion, he killed a lion, and found a bee's nest inside the lion's head. And the whole point was that no one was going to be able to guess the riddle. And in the story in the Bible, like, Samson told Delilah, and then Delilah told everyone else, and Samson got really pissed off when they knew the answer to the riddle because that's impossible, and so he knew she did it. That's the story. But this is not the first time we've talked about Samson in the Dark Tower, Matt, because we talked about his jawbone that he used to kill like 100 people way back in the Gunslinger.
Yeah, so this is, I mean, maybe it's doing more than this, but it does seem to be a reference to this Samson and the jawbone and what's going on with Roland. I did want to point out that Samson's riddle sucks.
It does.
It's an awful riddle.
It's a cheat riddle.
It's a goddamn Bilbo Baggins riddle, Scott, because Gollum gives a series of excellent riddles to Bilbo, and Bilbo matches most of them and gives back some good riddles. And then finally, he kind of almost accidentally says, "What have I got in my pocket?" And that's not a riddle. And but Gollum takes it as one, and Bilbo lets him take it as one. So, you know, Bilbo, you cheated, and you know you cheated. You stole that ring from Gollum.
Yeah, you did.
Sorry, I'm getting angry. But anyway, the Hobbit, which is part of Lord of the Rings, has you know, a lot of riddles in it, such as the ones under the Misty Mountains when Bilbo confronts Gollum, and the one involving the way to get into the door to the Lonely Mountain, and also the one to get in the door to Moria, this speak friend and enter riddle. So both of these riddles were keys, which I think is interesting. Keys to doors. So we're connected. I'm really leaning on the Lord of the Rings this week, but honestly, like the idea of a riddle and being a way to enter is something that I think the story might be playing with here.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I like that a whole bunch. And I mean, obviously the riddles are important because the riddle book was something that Jake needed. He had to have this, right? Riddles were littered through his essay, and he had to have it here. Deep Now actually gives Jake another riddle. What can run but never walks, has a mouth but never talks, has a bed but never sleeps, has a head but never weeps. Jake doesn't know the answer to the riddle. He gives up, and Deep Now is like, don't give up, just think about it. Just it might be important later, Jake.
Yeah, might be important to the plot.
Do you know the answer to this riddle? Because I debated whether I said should we do the answer now, or should we wait and see if it comes up in the story later? Later.
I mean, I think I do. Should I say it if I think I know?
Yeah, go for it.
I mean, I think it's a river, which seems
that is correct.
Okay, but I don't remember any rivers being important in the story yet. So
no,
it doesn't. Figuring that out doesn't really lead me anywhere. So
true. Yeah, but it is a river, and we'll see if that means anything in the future.
Yeah. Okay.
So Jake finally leaves the store behind and continues down 2nd Avenue, knowing that he has somewhere to be, but not sure where. He passes by a bum who he gives his change to, a restaurant called Choo-Choo Mama's, which is relating to Choo-Choo again, a record store called Tower of Power Records, playing the Rolling Stones, and a mirror store called Reflections of You. These are not thin metaphors here, Matt. This is like really obvious stuff.
It's almost like the closer he gets to this lot with the rose in it, the more just sort of absurd the universe becomes. Everything is a reference. Everything is meaningful. The world is just saturated with meanings in a way that becomes improbable. And
the Rolling Stones song is Paint It Black, which of course I see a red door and I want to paint it black. So we're talking about doors again, in Tower of Power Records.
Yeah. Yep.
It's wonderful. And I think this is where I want to remind you that these are the things that Eddie Dean encountered in his dream back in chapter 1. He was holding a book in his hand. He passed by a bum. In Eddie's dream, the bum was Balazar. And then I think later, I forget the guy who he threw at the Lobstrosities, but he sees that guy. He hears the Rolling Stones being played. He sees the Reflections of You store, and he walks up on a delicatessen, Tom and Jerry's, but that's not what Jake sees.
Right. Yeah. Which, I mean, I don't know what exactly to read into that. I know that Jake and Eddie are sort of in different time periods, but Jake's, but Eddie's dream doesn't necessarily relate to any particular time period. It's a dream.
But in Eddie comes from the future as compared to Jake.
True.
Jake is in 1977, I believe, 77 or 78. Eddie came from 1987, but in his dream, Tom and Jerry's is a functioning deli. In 1977 with Jake, it is like you see signs that the deli used to be there.
Yeah,
it's been shut down and bulldozed since.
And so I think I had an inkling of this, but basically the implication there is, assuming there's consistency, Eddie is seeing the past even relative to Jake. I'm having trouble remembering. Does Eddie get to the place where the rose ought to be?
Yeah, that's Tom and Jerry's.
That's Tom and Jerry's. So
yeah.
Tom and Jerry's either used to be the place where the rose now is, or something. I don't know what to make of this, really.
Yeah. Well, Tom and Jerry's is where Eddie takes out the key that he has,
right,
and opens the door and sees the Dark Tower.
Right.
That is the door he walks through to get that beautiful image we read last week about the Dark Tower. All we see here is this lot and eventually the rose.
The rose, yeah.
I think the book is inviting us to compare this because King has set up the dream and now we're reliving the dream through Jake. So we're being invited to compare the images that people are seeing. And I want to compare what Jake sees and feels when he looks at the rose to what Eddie sees and feels when he looks at the tower, because I think that is important.
Yeah, I think that this area, this lot, this rose, this is some nexus of power of some kind. And the rose specifically seems to be this important thing. Like, it seems like this is a very, very important rose. Like, and it's important that it be physically here in this actual physical lot in New York City.
Sure.
This isn't just like a vision. This isn't like Jake is stumbling around. He wanders into a random lot and he sees a vision of the rose. I think this cosmic uber rose is actually here in New York City. And I mean, maybe this is why New York City is so important, is because the rose is here. Like this is why these characters have been selected, is they each have like some kind of relationship to this place, this special place, this special epoch. It's all, like you said, the rose itself is already obviously special. Its location is made even more special by the fact that Eddie gets his vision of the Dark Tower when he goes to the same location in a dream.
Yeah.
So the universe is telling us this is a very important rose.
Yes, that is true. But before we see the rose, we just see the empty lot, and we get the sign on the empty lot that says Mills Construction and Sombra Real Estate Associates are continuing to remake the face of Manhattan. Coming soon to this location, Turtle Bay Luxury Condominiums. Call 555-6712 for information. You will be so glad you did. So Turtle Bay Luxury Condominiums, and if not clear enough for you, the lot has some graffiti written on it that will sound a little familiar to us. See the turtle of enormous girth on his shell, he holds the earth. If you want to run and play, come along the beam today. And turtle and beam are capitalized in that little poem, that graffiti poem there. So once again, this is King playing with us because we know what the turtle and the beam are. Jake does not. But we know the meaning of all this stuff, and it makes it seem very, very important because we know the turtle is one of the 12 guardians. The turtle has a beam attached to him. There's supposed to be like a portal by where the turtle is, right?
Yeah. What's funny, the way my brain works, I get the turtle reference, I get the beam reference, I get the idea that he's probably being led in this direction. What I latch onto is like Mills Construction and Sombra Real Estate. I don't think we've heard those names.
No, those are new names.
Are we gonna hear about these names later? Because that's the one thing we didn't really talk about with the Choo-Choo book too much, and we might get a chance to later. But like, there are so many names where it's like Martin and Susanna, I think, is in there. But then then there's other names we don't recognize, and I'm like, well, are those characters we're going to get to know? And so that's I think there's a combination of stuff that's being thrown at us that we do recognize and stuff that we don't recognize but that we will recognize. And I think that's one of the things that's fun to me to kind of pay attention to and wonder about.
Yeah, I mean, and one of the things King does so often is he uses proper nouns for things so much that you're never really sure, is this a name that's going to be important, or is this just like King will never say soda, he will say Coke. He will say, like, he will never say I got a hamburger, he will say I got a Big Mac. Like he loves to use proper names for things. And so yeah, there's this uncertainty here where you're like, Mills Construction, is that gonna matter?
Yeah.
Or is that just him being as specific as he likes to be?
Yeah. I appreciate the fact that we may never hear about that again, but also I'm definitely gonna continue to wonder about it.
Cool. That sounds great. All right, so Jake hops the fence and heads into the vacant lot, and things start to get pretty weird. Okay, like start to get like super weird. So Jake like suddenly feels the white again, and he starts talking, and everything is still here, he repeated to himself, unaware that his face was filling with its own inner glow. Everything. He was hearing a sound, had been hearing it ever since he entered the lot, in fact. It was a wonderful high humming, inexpressibly lonely and inexpressibly lovely. It might have been the sound of a high wind on a desert plain, except it was alive. It was, he thought, the sound of 1,000 voices singing to some great open chord. He looked down and realized there were faces in the tangled weeds and low bushes and heaps of bricks. Faces. "What are you?" Jake whispered. "Who are you?" There was no answer, but he seemed to hear beneath the choir the sound of hoofbeats and dusty earth and gunfire and angels calling hosannas from the shadows. The faces in the wreckage seemed to turn as he passed. They seemed to follow his progress, but no evil intent did they bear. He could see 46th Street and the edge of the UN building on the other side of First Avenue, but the buildings did not matter. New York did not matter. It had become as pale as window glass. The humming grew. Now it was not 1,000 voices, but 1,000,000, an open funnel of voices rising from the deepest well of the universe. He caught names in that group voice, but could not have said what they were. One might have been Martin. One might have been Cuthbert. Another might have been Roland of Gilead. There were names. There was a babble of conversation that might have been 10,000 entwined stories, but above all was that gorgeous, swelling hum, a vibration that wanted to fill his head with bright, white light. It was, Jake realized with a joy so overwhelming that threatened to burst him to pieces, the voices of yes, the voice of white, the voice of always. It was a great chorus of affirmation, and it sang in the empty lot. It sang for him. So, like, if you were wondering what this power is and if it's good or bad, right? Like, this seems to be the most pure, the most good, the most high. Like, it is everything. It is always.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's beautiful writing. It's almost religious in its in its like sense of pure goodness and trying to push Jake and therefore you through the mechanism of empathy into this space of like joyful appreciation of this beautiful experience and this beautiful moment. This is yet again one of these things I love about this book is. Just imagining this feeling gives you kind of an approximation of what this feeling is for this character, and it's such a beautiful feeling. It's a pick me up as you're reading or listening to this. You're like, oh, what a beautiful image, what a beautiful idea that I now have in my mind.
Yeah, a joy so overwhelming that it threatened to burst him to pieces. The voice of yes, the voice of white, the voice of always. I love that repetition there. And I do want to compare this to Eddie's vision. So Eddie in his dream is at the same spot. He opens the door, he sees the Dark Tower. And while he sees power and everything and all encompassing things, Eddie's dream takes a turn for nightmarish, right? Like he sees this overwhelming darkness spreading across the land that like wants to take him and like this is the white, the light, right? And in Eddie's dream, this thing towering over him is threatening to rip him away from the light forever. So,
well, yeah, I feel like that's going to be parallel to this worm that we're about to see in a minute. This darkness that Jake sees in the rose. Because I think very, I mean, we basically already talked about this, but Eddie's dream and Jake's walk here are extremely, extremely parallel to each other. Yeah, I think especially as we get to this location where Eddie has similar feelings about his vision of the Dark Tower in this field of roses. I mean, that's obviously a connection.
Sure.
To the feelings that Jake has about this rose and these faces on the ground and this humming sound. And then both of them have a subsequent part where they become aware of this darkness that's present.
Yeah, this threat. Yeah. But first, let's get to the key, because he sees the key first and then the rose. We see almost automatically that this is the same key Eddie Dean saw in the fire. Again, you as an audiobooker cannot see the pictures that are included in this book, but it is a picture drawn for us that is in the text, and it matches the picture that Eddie drew in the sand, which we also got to see a literal, like, drawn picture inside the book for. So it's helped us there. But even without the photos, I think the commenting on the little S curve at the end that Eddie also like commented on so deliberately, I think makes it very clear that this is the same key.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think I needed to even know about the S curve. I think if two characters who are magically separated both see an image of a key, I'm going to assume it's the same key. But yeah, absolutely, it does.
Touché.
It does verify that, I would say. Yeah. And you know, like, again, roses surrounding the tower. Jake sees a rose. Eddie saw the key in the fire. Jake sees the key here physically. They've both been led to this location. They've both been shown these specific totems. They're being drawn together, or maybe just Jake is being drawn to Eddie. One or the other, or both. I don't know.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, that's my interpretation of all this stuff that's happening here.
Yeah, that's great. And then he sees the rose, and he sees in the rose a universe, and not just one universe, but thousands of universes. But then, as you said, this beautiful, wonderful dream darkens a little bit, because he see here, the fear returned. Only now it had become outright terror. It's right, he thought. Everything here is right, but it could go wrong. Has started to go wrong already, I think. I'm being allowed to feel as much of that wrongness as I can bear, but what is it? And what can I do? It was something like a worm. He could feel it beating like a sick and dirty heat, warring with the serene beauty of the rose, screaming harsh profanities against the choir of voices which had soothed and lifted him. He leaned closer to the rose and saw that its core was not just one sun, but many, perhaps all suns contained within a ferocious yet fragile shell. But it's wrong. It's all in danger. So, Matt, what is the rose, and what's the danger?
Well, I have a few thoughts.
Sure.
The rose could be a multiverse. We're basically told that it contains universes, it contains suns. It could just be the universe, and all the roses clustered in the field around the Dark Tower are representations of other universes, and so that's why the Dark Tower is this hub of multiverses. I'm going to reference 1997's Men in Black.
Of course.
The rose reminds me a lot of the galaxy, which is just a marble, but it's this very tiny thing. It's seemingly insignificant, but it actually possesses this huge significance. Of course, in that case, it's just a galaxy, whereas this rose sort of contains the multiverse. We've been introduced to this idea that size doesn't. Well, okay, we don't really understand it, but size is this concept that where the Dark Tower comes into play. It's this nexus of size, whatever that means. And so the idea that this rose could contain the multiverse, which in which the rose exists in this multiverse, it's just a rose. It's sitting here in this empty lot in New York City. That apparent contradiction, you can sort of hand wave it away and just say, yeah, it's a nexus of size. As for what the worm is, I mean, we know there's an antagonist. We know there's a Man in Black. We know there's somebody who's trying to keep Roland from accomplishing his goal, and messing with him. And we know there's this idea that, like, if the wrong person sits in this room atop the Dark Tower, that could be just this horrible, horrible fate for the whole universe.
Yeah.
And so that's that whole kind of picture, that whole possibility, I think, hints at what this idea of what this darkness is, this worm.
Yeah, I mean, we know in Roland's world that, like, the rules of physics are breaking apart, right? That distance and size are changing. The beams, we understand it, kind of hold things together, and those aren't working as well anymore. And so something is causing that, and that could be the same worm that we're describing here, for sure. Yeah.
Yep.
It's just overall like something's in danger and it needs help, and that is what these characters are here for. And so that's kind of, I think, with the ways in which we're seeing Jake get pulled into this quest now, because Eddie saw the tower and immediately became a tower junkie almost, right? He's like, I got to see it again. If a door appeared in front of me right now, I wouldn't walk through it because I need to see this to the end now. And Jake has kind of just been brought into this as well. He's this wonderful, beautiful rose. And when he wakes up and sees he's in the normal lot, one of the first things he says is like, can I leave this thing? Because like, what if someone comes and picks it? And he's so worried about the rose, and he gets told that's not the kind of danger it is. It can protect itself from that kind of mundane threat, but it cannot protect itself from this all-encompassing darkness that is happening. So he seems on board with the quest now before even really understanding what the quest is.
Yeah, which I think that line about it being able to protect itself is great, because it's like, oh, so that really, really verifies that this rose is actually here. It's actually a real rose, a real magical super rose in this place. And if random people pass by, it's going to use magic to sort of keep them from being aware of it or bothering it.
It's kind of, he describes it as camouflage, right? That like he passes out and wakes up hours and hours later, and the magic of the lot is gone. Things aren't shining and filled with light as they were before. They're just normal. Even the rose itself looks like what a wild rose would look like, where it's not perfectly shaped and cut. It's kind of like some of the ends are dying off. And that is what everyone else sees when they look at this lot. Yeah. But he's seen the power underneath it.
Yeah, I want to point out that he does like bash his head on the ground, and he like has an injury. He's bleeding when he falls down. So like, as good and powerful as this rose is, it still let him be hurt here. And I don't know if that means anything, but the fact that he walks into this place unharmed and walks out of it injured, I don't know. It seems to suggest something, some kind of danger.
Yeah, I mean that the rose or the quest or Katet or whatever you want to call it is going to demand everything.
Yeah, it's a thing that always takes its toll.
Yeah. So he still has the key, which is another way for him to like verify that this all really happened. And he does get like a brief glimpse of another one of the faces, and that face, Matt, is Allie from Tull. Why?
Yeah, it's weird because he wouldn't know Allie. No, he never saw Allie. Maybe Roland told him a description of her, but I don't even think that happened. There's definitely so much psychic stuff going on here that we can just kind of go, it's The Shining. But I mean, I do like your question, like why that though? Why Allie specifically? Right. Why not Eddie?
Like, yeah, like out of all the faces he's gonna see, like in his brief like peek under the camouflage one last time before he leaves the lot. Why that one? It's, and I don't have an answer either. I'm not posing this because I'm about to like blow you away with, well, this is why. I don't know, but I do think it's worth questioning, because I agree with you. Like the one face he definitely does not see or does not recognize is Eddie's. Like we don't have Eddie's name anywhere here, and yet he is basically reliving Eddie's experience in a certain way.
Yeah.
And so you would think he'd be most connected to Eddie out of all these people.
Right. I mean, it's almost like all the ways in which Roland was drawing Eddie and Susanna. It's almost like Eddie is the one who's drawing Jake here. And I don't know if that's actually what's happening, but they seem to be very connected here.
Definitely. Yeah. We'll just have to put that aside and pick it up again if we can.
Okay.
So Jake collects his books and the key, and after being assured that the rose will be safe, he leaves the lot behind.
Yeah, and once again, it's Roland's voice that does the reassuring, which I find really interesting, because I don't think Roland, like actual Roland, knows about any of this. Like it's not Roland like watching this and saying this, unless there's some kind of like timey-wimey shit going on, which is possible.
Yeah, I mean, Roland's never really spoken about any of being aware of any of this. So we didn't talk about this, and this is like a weird place to circle back to it, but I think it's a conversation worth having, because in his essay, Jake said, Roland let me die. That is the truth. I still love him. that is the truth. And that's interesting, right? That like he is so connected to this man that even after that moment that he fully remembers happening, he still feels love for him in the same way Roland still feels love for him after doing it to him. And I don't like, that's interesting, right? That's like, again, this connection is beyond just the normal bond of people.
Yeah, right. It's sort of beautiful, and it's sort of like, I know it's horrible that Roland let him die and everything, but I think it's really great what the book has done, where it's, you know, like we talked about previously, Roland sort of almost accidentally, involuntarily saves him and creates this paradox for himself. But it's like, it's an authentic from the gut gunslinger action to have done that. And the idea that Jake still loves him even though he did that thing, I just find kind of beautiful. I mean, I don't know, maybe that's sad in a way, but
yeah, I mean, I think it is sad in a way, but I do think it's beautiful. I mean, like, again, we have to talk about how shitty Jake's parents are.
Yeah.
That maybe his dad's so bad that the man that let him fall down a chasm is still better.
Well, I guess maybe beautiful is the wrong word. It's very human, maybe is what I should say. Like the idea that even the person who betrays you, that doesn't mean that you stop loving them. Yeah. And I mean, that's very human and very relatable, actually.
Especially as a child.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So Jake returns home and confronts his parents, who are kind of pissed off after he took a whole day of hooky and then shows up bleeding with his clothes all ripped up. And I really think, Matt, this is where King taking time early in this chapter to set up Jake's relationship with his parents pays off greatly, because we see here that the fear of them and the fear of feeling crazy is melting away and replaced with something totally else. And I love how King writes this. To this point in his life, Jake had been aware of only 3 feelings about his father: puzzlement, fear, and a species of weak, confused love. Now a 4th and 5th surfaced. One was anger. The other was disgust. Mixed in with these unpleasant feelings was a sense of homesickness. It was the largest thing inside him right now, weaving through everything else like smoke. He looked at his father's flushed cheeks and screaming haircut and wished he was back in the vacant lot, looking at the rows and listening to the choir. This is not my place, he thought. Not anymore. I have work to do. If only I knew what it was. I love it. Love it.
Yeah, it's just beautiful and awesome to watch Jake like begin to channel this terrible purpose that he's been awakened to.
Yeah, and this idea of like, as you grow older, you feel new feelings about your parents that you never did before, right? Like this part of growing up and aging is learning new things and seeing your parents as things different from what you saw them as when you were just a little kid, right? And so this idea of like puzzlement, fear, and the weak, confused love is what a child has for his parents. And then anger and disgust is these new feelings he has that only a more mature person could recognize in his parents to have. I love it. It's almost as if like this event has aged Jake a little bit. Yeah,
right. It is sort of a coming of age little micro story.
Yeah. So Jake pushes his father, summoning this like great strength to do so, enough that it scares the hell out of him. And then he heads into his room alone. This is really interesting. And I want to kind of spend a little bit of time with you on this, Matt, because with all of the other drawings, the characters were mostly separated from everyone when it happened. So Eddie only had Henry, who died right in the moments right before he came into the world. Odetta and Detta didn't really have anyone in their lives besides the people that worked for them, and their drawing was so quick there was really no breaking with the world. It was just really simple. Jake has family. He has a place. He has a home, and perhaps we're seeing in this moment, in this like, this is not my home anymore. This is not my place. We're seeing how Katet like divides you from your life in order to use you.
I like that. You know, also his family just kind of sucks. Like his parents probably love him true. In like the inevitable biological way that parents love their kids, but they seem completely detached and self-involved to the point that it'll only be after losing Jake that they will realize that he ever existed on a conscious level.
Sure.
And I mean, like the other characters, like the housekeeper and the teachers, they seem to have this affection for Jake, but it's not clear that he really feels all that connected to them. So it does seem like it's relatively easy. It's going to be relatively easy to break these bonds if that's the direction we're going.
Yeah, it definitely. But there are some people that still care for him.
Yeah.
Not his housekeeper. Like I love how the housekeeper is presented, right? Because the housekeeper is sent into the room because Jake won't listen to his parents, so she sends him in there. And King describes this as like she doesn't care because this is just her job, which of course it is. Like this is her living. This is what she does. Like she's ordered in here, and she doesn't really care what he has to say because it's just her job. Like, why should she care? Like, this is her job is not to be a parent to this child. Her job is to clean and cook. And like, that's what she's treating it as. So there's nothing like I'm not saying like Mrs. Shaw sucks, right? I'm just saying like, here's another person in his life that just is not really an authority figure to him.
Basically just another employee. Like, I mean, you could even have the same word for the French teacher. It's not, the French teacher might care about him, but
I think the French teacher genuinely cares about him.
But
I really do.
But it does remind me a bit of the Odetta situation, where I think that her driver did genuinely care for her, but there's still that distance that's created by like the professional sort of relationship.
Sure. Yeah. No, I would agree with that. So Jake, though, having calmed down here, lies to Mrs. Shaw, or tells Mrs. Shaw to lie to his parents just enough to kind of calm them down a little bit. And then she hands Jake a note from his French teacher, who again is just incredibly kind here. I know what you mean about the professional remove here. Like, this is not a father figure for Jake. It can't be. He's his teacher. He's doing his job, but it is just an incredibly kind note he sends the kid here. Just like, hey, we're all thinking about you. We know this happens. We know people get nervous. We know people get stressed out with exams. We're here for you. If you need to reschedule anything, just let me know. I will work with you. It's going to be fine. It's just so incredibly kind. It really is.
Yeah. It makes you love this teacher, and it also shows you, I think, like when people show love for a character, it makes you love that character too. And the fact that everyone loves Jake kind of makes you love Jake even more.
Sure. But the other thing that happens here is that his English teacher has read his essay, graded it, and she fucking loves it. She loved the repetition. She loves. She found deep, rich metaphor in the nonsense. Like, I don't know what to do here, Matt, because on the one hand, I absolutely think the King is making fun of English teachers with this stuff. But also, he was an English teacher before he sold his first book. Like, he taught writing and English and literature for a long time, and he loves to find metaphor and meaning and stuff. So, I don't like it's kind of like a loving tease, like where sometimes you're just fishing meaning out of stuff that is really just nonsense. But also not really nonsense.
Right, because that's what I love about it, is the teacher is actually right on the money that there's something below the surface going on with this essay.
Yeah, that's true.
But the problem is they don't realize that what's going on with the essay is that they're in a Stephen King story.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's funny because like Jake reads this and then he like bursts out laughing, but I don't find it to be like mean-spirited laughter at the expense of this teacher. I find it to be like laughter out of relief. Like, oh, thank God. Like I literally fled the school out of the terror of what would come of this. And it turns out that they just thought it was a brilliant essay.
Yeah.
I do not pretend to understand all the symbolism, e.g. Lady of Shadows, gunslinger, but it seems clear that you yourself are the prisoner of school, society, etc., and that the educational system is the speaking demon. Is it possible that both Roland and the gunslinger are the same authority figure? Yes, it is. Your father, perhaps? I became so intrigued by this possibility that I looked up his name in your records. I noted it is Elmer, but I further noted that his middle initial is R, which is actually interesting because after this, Jake asks his dad what his middle name is, and his dad says he doesn't have one.
He doesn't have one. It's just an R. He just has a middle initial, which is by far the funniest thing yet that
really
he says it like it's nothing. Like, yeah, it's just I just have a middle initial like a like a president, and which is bullshit, obviously. And Jake correctly identifies this as ridiculous. I love that so much.
It's so good. It's so good. But yeah, like I agree with you that I don't think King is being too mean-spirited here. I also agree that Jake's laughter is totally just out of relief. But I do like just the way he writes this. Like, it seems clear that you yourself are the prisoner of school, society, etc., and that the educational system is the speaking demon. I just think like this certainty with which she has decoded these metaphors it makes me laugh.
That's because
no, that's actually, you're wrong.
Yes, the educational system is not. I don't even know how you could make that connection, honestly. But you know what? I'm not going to judge somebody for their reading because look at what we're doing.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, that's why, like, there's some people out there who would read this and get offended and be like, get all up in arms because, oh, Stephen King's making fun of analysis. No, he's not. He's having fun.
Yeah.
He's having fun, and I love it. It's great. It's really great.
I mean, you could even read it as like this English teacher. This isn't a serious interpretation. This is more like the English teacher saying, good try, Jake. I had to read 40 essays that were just, what truth means to me is that it is the opposite of falsehood.
Yeah, it is always important to tell the truth, no matter what you do.
And then you wrote this very ballsy poetic attempt at getting at something which obviously means a lot to you, Jake. And in English teacher's head, I don't know what the hell this means, but I really enjoy that you're trying to do this kind of thing.
Sure.
And like that to me is a fun reading. I don't know if it's, I don't know. I think it's supported by the text because you could just read it as the teacher is just trying to kind of extend a hand to Jake. It's not so much that them saying, this is literally what I believe about this essay. It's more them saying like, I know that you're having a hard time, but I want to give you encouragement for this sort of thing that you're trying to do here.
Yeah, and her postscript here is, if you left school today because you had sudden doubts about my ability to understand a final essay of such unexpected richness, I hope I have assuaged them.
Yeah.
So he left not because he thought everyone was going to think he's crazy, but because he doubted her ability to understand his essay,
right?
Which is just so like, it's so kind of reverential. I think I agree with you. I think she read 100 essays and they were shitty. And then this one was the only one that she found provocative. The only one that made her think about metaphor and look up a poem for a teacher that must read thousands and thousands of poorly written shit a year. Anything that is at all different has got to be like, oh my God, I love this. This is brilliant.
Yeah. No. And I mean, I personally, I didn't read it as a serious, like, please grace us with your presence, Lord Jake. I read it as, she's buttering him up, sort of. She's being like, look, like, I know you're having a hard time. It's really obvious that you were so freaked out that you ran away. I'm just letting you know that, you don't need to worry. You should come back. There's not going to be any fallout from this.
Interesting. I'm not sure if I read it as the same amount of like, this wasn't that great, but I'm just trying to make you feel better.
I literally think that either interpretation is supported, and I think it's I definitely enjoy your "this is King making fun of English teachers" interpretation. That just honestly isn't how I interpret it the first time through.
Sure. I've just had some English teachers that I would just like roll my eyes at, and like as you can clearly see, I love books and I love talking about books. But some of those discussions we had in English class, I'm like, what are we doing here?
Well,
what are we doing?
I mean, yeah, and to confront that directly, I think that you and I are both sort of reacting to the fact that we did have English teachers who would be like, the diamond symbolizes beauty and clarity, and it's like, well, maybe, but you have to say, like, you have to make it clear that that's your reading, and it could symbolize other things. It could symbolize the opposite of that. It depends on the context. Why would the author choose to make that choice? Like, there's so many richer questions you can ask that are deeper than just the diamond is, this is what the diamond symbolizes.
Right. And I think that's what she's doing here. Like, it's clear to me that you yourself are the prisoner.
Yes.
And that the educational system is the speaking demon. Like, that sentence right there reminds me very much of a lot of my English classes.
I agree. I do. And in fact, that is the number one part of this that makes me lean in the direction of your interpretation, for sure.
Cool. That was way too much time on that, but it was great. It was great.
Yeah.
So, having calmed down his parents, Jake finally takes some time to look at the books he bought from the Manhattan Restaurant of the Mind. And King basically has written the entirety of Charlie and the Choo-Choo here. It's a picture book story, and he's written all of it. And we're not going to read all of it because it's a whole book. And I actually own it. They published a version of this children's book with pictures, and I own it, and it's wonderful. Maybe one day I'll read it for the class. I'll do like a stream and I'll read it and be like, Charlie and the Choo-Choo by Beryl Evans. Anyway, the important parts of this are, one of the big ones is Charlie the Choo-Choo has this song that he repeats over and over again, which is, don't ask me silly questions. I won't play silly games. I'm just a simple choo-choo train, and I'll always be the same. I only want to race along beneath the bright blue sky and be a happy choo-choo train until the day I die. I want to talk to you about how King makes this thing seem ominous as fuck without it actually being ominous. Because, so Jake reiterates here how much he doesn't trust the smile of Charlie. Like, he looks at Charlie's smile and it is not like a happy smile. And there's this really interesting moment here, and I kind of wanted to get what your read on this, is that, like, he doesn't trust the smile of Charlie, and then it makes him look back at his final essay and reread the line, I'm pretty sure that Blaine is dangerous. Which is just kind of really random here. It's just like, what? Why did that make you look at that? Yeah,
I don't know. Was the train going to be connected to Blaine? Blaine, the train, they rhyme. I mean, I'm so worried about this train, Scott. Is there really going to be a sentient evil train? I mean, it's possible the train is a metaphor, and it's just like there's going to be a guy named Blaine, and the train is a metaphor for Blaine. I don't know. Sure. I mean, maybe there's a train that speaks in verse, though. And maybe it's a train that's built by North Central Positronics.
Could be.
I don't know. I do love I love everything about the book. That was probably the most delightful experience of my life. But stuff like, it's a children's book. It's supposed to be this light tone, but it's got lines like, until the day I die. Yeah. And stuff like don't ask me silly questions. I won't play silly games. It has this like edge to it where it's like, it's calling you silly, and it's accusing you of wanting it to play silly games. I'm going to do what I'm going to do. Don't mess with me. It like, you can read all of this sinister intent into this train who just wants to keep going and doing its thing and doesn't want to be bothered. Something about a small, gruff voice is also like creepy, where it's like, the fact that it's small makes it creepier for some reason.
Sure. And then there's this line, Engineer Bob lived alone, and Charlie was the first real friend he'd had since his wife died long ago in New York. And you're just like, that's just not a line you would put in a kid's book. Like, what does it matter if, like, just say Engineer Bob lived alone. You don't have to say his wife died.
Yeah. Or all these other references to, Mr. Martin, the world has moved on, Susanna. It all,
the basic story is that Charlie gets replaced by a better train. But then he finds a use for the train at the end because Mr. Martin, Bob tries to get, Mr. Martin needs a train because the other train breaks down, and Bob convinces him to use Charlie.
I kind of want
it's a happy ending.
I kind of want to buy this book and read it to my kids without comment. And then just decades later, they just discover the Dark Tower on their own, and they confront me about this. I really want this to happen.
It's great. You can buy it on Amazon. It's really great. I'm leafing through it right now as we talk. So sorry if there's page numbers on the mic. It's really great. I mean, one of the things that the book points out is that the children in the back of the train, like, it ends with Mr. Martin got Charlie and Engineer Bob a gig pulling kids around the brand new Midworld amusement park and fun fair in California, and you will find them there to this day, pulling laughing children hither and thither in a world of lights and music and good wholesome fun. But you look at the picture,
and they look terrified. They look absolutely terrified. It's such a good. It's so good. It's so good. I love it.
Yeah. Oh man, I'm so into the train situation, and I'm so curious, and the fact that it has all these names, these references, that like Martin, for example, being the one that stands out to me the most. I don't have the pieces. I don't have enough pieces to put together the puzzle, but I feel like it's all going to come together at some point.
Yeah, because when Jake does finish reading the book, he just starts circling random lines in it. He circles the Midworld Railway Company. He circles Engineer Bob, a small gruff voice, woo-oo, the first real friend he'd had since his wife died long ago in New York, Mr. Martin, the world has moved on, Susanna. He circles all these words. Again, King is doing this thing where he gives us some of it. We understand some of it. We understand Susanna. We understand Mr. Martin. We understand the world has moved on. The rest of them, we don't. The Midworld Railway Company, why does that matter? Engineer Bob, why does that matter? What is it about his wife dying long ago in New York that matters? But obviously something told him that these were important things.
Yeah. Yep. We'll see.
It's fun.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, definitely. It's super fun. That's to bring the whole conversation in a circle. Incredibly fun and engaging, and just making me want to keep going. Every single week we do this, I'm a little annoyed that I have to stop reading.
I'm sorry.
I signed up for this. So
you did. And there's no take backsies.
No take backsies. It's true.
All right. So the chapter ends with the voices returning to their argument in Jake's head in the middle of the night. But he gets up and, without thinking, grabs for the key. And as soon as he touches the key, the voices go away, and he realizes that holding on to it will make them stop. And the chapter ends with him thinking, "Tell him," he thought, with no idea who the thought was for. "Tell him to grab the key. The key makes the voices go." And that's how the chapter ends. So I mean, if we can move on into Matt's musings for the week, let's fucking do it, man.
I think he's talking to Eddie. That's my prediction. Okay. My other predictions are, I think they're going to find a creepy train. It's funny, during this conversation is the first time that I connected the word Blaine to the word train, and I'm like, well, maybe there's not really a train. Maybe it's a person, and this is a metaphor, but I don't know. I think maybe
Blaine is a pain, and that is the truth.
Yeah, and the rain in Spain falls mainly on the plain as well. I think this is all tied up in this big knot of timey-wiminess also, because I think Martin / the Man in Black is going to appear again, because I think he's a time traveler. I think that's pretty uncontroversial, actually, at this, like, just based on what we know of the way the story works. Sure. So I think we're going to see the Man in Black again, is that prediction.
Cool. All right. That's exciting.
Okay.
We will find out next week and in the weeks ahead how many of your predictions are correct. But next week we move on to the last chapter of the first part of this book. This book's divided into two parts. Part 1 is Jake, and part 2 is Lud. So I think we know what part 1's about. No idea what the second part is about. So we're going to finish up part 2 next week. With chapter 3, and the name of which I'm blanking on right now. I forgot what the third chapter. I think it's Demons and Doors, or Doors and Demons, or something. Door and Demon.
Okay,
that's chapter 3.
That's fun.
Yeah. So before we wrap everything up, we have to talk about the audience discussion. Last week we asked a question: what are the drawers, and do you have any places in your life that you would describe this way? And we got one answer from Sarah Penguin. Matt, did you want to read your summary of Sarah Penguin's answer?
So Sarah talks about the concept of drawers as being like a place for keeping stuff, specifically the stuff that would be your seedy secrets, or just the stuff that you don't want people to see. And Sarah also talks about how each of these characters in the story has their own drawers, which is associated with their secrets and the things they don't want to be shown to other people.
Yeah.
I think that's interesting. That's the fun thing about the metaphor, is you can push it in all kinds of directions. And this is actually not really a direction that I took it in. I think I just was, if I had answered this question, which I didn't really, I would have really gone more in the direction of like the wasteland, the part of your life that is full of regrets or shame or things that, or maybe it was a time in your life. Maybe it's a physical location that you associate with a time in your life.
Yeah, that's where I took it too.
Yeah. So like the drawers for me would probably be a particular period of time in my life, I would say.
There's places in my life which really bad things have happened to me, like certain areas of town I lived in. One apartment in particular I have a lot of bad memories of, and those are like my drawers.
Yeah.
I don't like those places. But they are where the most shameful and sad and awful parts of my life are all located, and I feel like walking back into that area would remind me of those places.
Yeah, for sure.
Just thinking about it, it's like, I don't want to go back there.
Yeah, I'm doing the same thing right now, where I'm like, let me push on all these sore spots that I intentionally don't ever think about. Yeah. Anyway, let's move on from that, Scott.
I drive past my drawers every once in a while, and I do so quickly. Yeah. All right. Well, next week's discussion question. This chapter had a lot of references in it. So we're going to ask, why do you think King makes so many references to other stories within this chapter? And, I mean, you can expand it to this book and the series as a whole. Why does he make so many references? And I'm not talking about in-universe, like Stephen King references. I'm talking about, like, we got Catch-22. We got Lord of the Flies. We got The Plague. We got Child Roll into the Dark Tower Came. We got The Wastelands. We have reference after reference after reference to other novels, to other stories, to other acts of creation. Why? Why is King doing this? What do you think?
Yeah, I'm excited to find out what people think.
Yeah, me too. So that is it for us here on Kingslingers. We will be back next week once again to cover Chapter 3 of The Wastelands, called Demon and Door. Or is it Door and Demon? I gotta look it up again. I forgot to write it down. Door and Demon. Door and Demon. The door comes first and then the demon, apparently. So, yes, come back next week to hear us talk about that one.
Awesome. Yeah, and remember, you can reach out to us via email at kingslingerspod@gmail.com or on Twitter @doofmedia.
Yes, and those are two places in which you can answer the discussion question. You can send us an email. We've gotten quite a few emails in the past week or so, Matt, from people new to the show that are catching up. And I just want a personal thank you to everyone that has reached out to us and let us know that they're enjoying the show. That means a lot to us to hear that. You know, we never know, like we're just kind of throwing this thing out into the void, and we're like, we can see our download numbers and it's like, well, I think people are enjoying it. But when you guys take the time to reach out to us and just let us know, we really do appreciate that. And if you want to give us thoughts about the readings that aren't specific to the discussion question, we can talk about those in that section anyway. If you don't like the question or you're having trouble coming up with an answer to the question, you can still talk about the other stuff. We will discuss, as long as it's not a spoiler for Matt, we can discuss some of that stuff on the podcast. So we'd love to hear from you guys. We'd love to hear what you think. What do you think about these books? If you're a new reader, if you're a constant reader, what do you think? Let us know.
Yeah, can't wait to hear from you. And if you like any of our shows and you want to support them, please consider donating to our Patreon account, patreon.com/doofmedia. If you donate to us at the $5 per month level, then you'll get to hang out with us once per month at the monthly Doof and Chill sessions, where Scott and I and usually a few other people from the Doof Podcast Network will hang out and do something fun. We always do something different and interesting.
Yeah, sometimes we play some video games with patrons, just fun stuff.
Yeah.
And of course, if you cannot afford to donate right now, that is absolutely okay. We're in crazy times right now. I don't have a job for 2 weeks, Matt. Luckily I'm still getting paid, but I'm forced to stay home. I'm very fortunate, but I don't have work, and a lot of people are out of work. So there are tons of non-financial ways you can support us. You can share the podcast. Really, honestly, like, we are mostly through word of mouth. We've done like 1 or 2 advertisements on Facebook. We're just really dipping our toes into that idea. But we are mostly a word of mouth show. So please share the show with everyone you can. If you like it and you think other people will too, share it with them. And you can, of course, always help us by leaving a rating and a review on iTunes,
on Spotify, on anywhere else that has the ability to leave reviews. This week's Spotlight review comes from Alex, who gives us 5 stars and says, I always love Matt and Scott's insights into what really makes a story tick, and Kingslingers doesn't fail to disappoint. I would recommend this podcast to anyone who loves The Dark Tower or wants to be invited into an excellent book club discussion of the themes and writing of the books while they read. Well, thank you so much, Alex. That was very nice of you. Really appreciate that.
Yeah, that's always reassuring to hear.
Yes, very much so. And thank you to everyone who has sent us a rating and a review. If you've done one, I will get to it. I promise. We got a lot. And so I'm really far behind Matt, but we're trying to catch. Maybe I'll start doing 2 a week. That seems, I don't know. That seems like I'm like patting us on the back too much. I'm reading 2 a week, but we want to show you guys appreciation for taking the time to do that. That's why we read them out loud. But thank you so much.
Yeah.
And that's it. We're done. We'll be back here next week for Chapter 3, Door and Demon. Long days and pleasant nights.
And may you have twice the number.